Hello and welcome, beautiful humans, to this episode of Wise Human. Today, I have a very special guest who is dear to me, my oldest friend, Jessica Sweet. I'm so excited that you're here with me today. We met in third grade. I don't
Yes,
remember
absolutely, since
you.
third grade. I just wanted to clarify when she says oldest, she means we've known each other the longest, not that I am the oldest person she knows.
This is very true. This is very true. Longest relationship besides my family. Yeah,
Right?
totally.
It's pretty incredible, right? To meet somebody in third grade that you can maintain a connection with throughout your adulthood also.
Yeah, we've seen so many different stages and phases of life.
Absolutely.
I feel like we could just go down a whole road there.
Pretty much.
Maybe for another time, another time.
Right.
We could probably have many episodes together.
Right.
Um,
I'm sure you're right.
so the other day we met for lunch, for brunch, and at the end of brunch, we just started having this like in-depth talk about life. And at the
Yeah.
end, I was like, man, I wish I was just recording this because everything we talked about is all good things that would be perfect on the podcast. So here we are. We're not going to try to recreate that, but we're going to talk about some of
No.
those things. So yeah, Jessica, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I was thinking and, about what we had talked about before. And I really connected with the most and thought would be something I'd really like to talk about and share today. The topic we were talking about parenting, just because I know for me, it's something that I wish I would have heard when I was first starting my parenting journey. A lot of times, not a lot of times, almost all the time in society, when you have kids, especially when you first have kids, people talk so much about how it's such a blessing and you're so fortunate and you need to enjoy every single moment while they're young. It makes you, or at least for me, it made me feel really inadequate at times because there were times that I was like, oh my gosh, I did want to have my children and I loved them so much, but what did I do to myself? Like, how did I get into this situation? Like, this is so much more difficult than anybody made it out to be. And then you start questioning yourself. Is this just difficult for me? Am I unique in this? And maybe I'm failing in some way, or there's something I'm lacking and don't have that I'm not seeing this every day as a blessing. And I'm really struggling to get through it. So that was something that I felt like, gosh, I wish I would have heard a podcast about that when I was first starting having my girls, because it would have helped me not feel quite so isolated in the
Yeah,
parenting journey.
I I appreciate you for even just raising this subject because I think it's something very important to talk about. And I don't have kids, but I have a handful of friends that have kids, and honestly, every single one of them at some point or another has shared that it's difficult with me. But why is it not something talked about on a bigger picture, a bigger level? Why do we not all have that conversation? Why is it like behind closed doors, one on one?
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you
Absolutely.
for stepping forward to bring this topic to light.
Absolutely. And, I think a lot of it has to do with mom shaming. There's a ton of mom shaming out. And this is
Mm,
not to take away from dads because I'm sure dads feel this way too. But for, moms, it's like there's something morally wrong with you if you complain about the difficulty associated with parenting. Um, but as my kids have gotten older and I've talked to friends who have had kids, I've realized it wasn't just me. It's really difficult for everyone. Just people are scared to say anything because they don't want to be judged, and they're already feeling inadequate. So they don't want to open themselves up to further feeling judgment from outside of being inadequate. They don't want that feeling validated. So I know definitely I was there. Even in it was even something I didn't really talk about with my husband for a long time, because I was worried that he would be like, oh my gosh, I had kids with this woman and she doesn't even want to be a parent to our children, which isn't really where I was coming from, but just feeling so, it really is just such a feeling of isolation. And I think for me, especially, I didn't have any friends at the time that were having kids as well. So I didn't have friends with kids to talk about it with. It wasn't till I got a little bit older that some of my friends started having kids as well. And I was able to, I felt compelled to tell them, like, it's way more difficult than people tell you it is. Right. So, I mean, that feeling of isolation, I think is compounded anyways when you first have kids, because like you're going about your life, living your life. There are things about you that you feel are unique things, or you feel are strong parts of your identity. And then you have this baby and you're excited about having this baby, but all of a sudden, all of those things that you used to do, you can't do anymore. And you are kind of already struggling with, what is my new identity now? And then like things you used to take for granted, like just like, oh, I ran out of milk, I'm going to run up to the store and get milk, become this whole production where you got to get the baby ready, and then they got to eat, and then they spit up on themselves, and you got to change them again. Like, it's becomes this whole big production, and 3 hours later, you still haven't made it to the store to get milk, so you haven't eaten your breakfast yet.
Now you're hangry, baby's hangry. Uh-oh.
Right, exactly. So it's this huge shift in self, and at least that's how it felt for me. Just this big shift in self, and this struggle to figure out, like, who am I now? Like, I'm a mom, but that's not all I am. And really trying to figure out what pieces of your identity are you holding on to, and what things are you losing. That's isolating in itself. And then adding on top of that, feeling inadequate because you're struggling with things like, gosh, I really hate playing Legos. Like, I feel like I should be enjoying this time that we're building things with Legos together, but I hate building things with Legos. Like, am I the only mom that feels this way? How come on all the commercials on TV, the moms seem like they're having a great time playing games with their kids? Like, is there something that I am missing about myself? Right?
Oh, marketing.
Right. But, of course, the media plays on our insecurities all the time anyways, as people, as women, as mothers, as teenagers, which I'm seeing with my daughters now that they're becoming teenagers. There is this constant barrage of trying to make us feel inadequate anyways, so that we'll buy something, right? Because if we buy that thing, then maybe we'll feel more adequate in our life, and maybe we'll feel like we're able to do something. But of course, buying things doesn't work. So then you got to buy more stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can look back and see that now, but it was just like, it was that, and not having anyone to talk to, and feeling like if I did talk to anybody about it, I'd be shamed in some way, or have my worst fears validated, that there was a piece of me missing. It was just a lot to deal with. So, and then, we had my oldest daughter, Sky, and she, she was just so easy as a baby. And we my husband and I had talked, and we wanted to have more than one child so that they would have close enough in age that they'd be able to have a good relationship with each other. Because, I mean, Nicole, but for the listeners, I have two sisters. One's 4 years younger than me, and one's 14 years younger than me. So, it gets harder and harder to have a super close relationship like you would with your sister, the farther apart you are in age. So we had our second daughter, Scarlett. They're about 2 years apart. And what nobody said ever is that it's more than double difficult. I don't know how the math works out, but adding a second child was more than twice as difficult as just having one.
It is not times
like I
two.
felt like, Right. Like I felt like at least with baby number 2, when Scarlett was born, I was ready. Like I knew what that would look like and I was ready. I wasn't ready. It was so much more difficult having a 2-year-old and a infant than I thought it was going to be. So we did joke about that quite a bit. Dave and I joked about that quite a bit, my husband Dave. So it's more than twice as difficult. But and like I said, now that they're older, you know, I can look back and I do understand that people were well intentioned when they would say things like try to savor these moments because the time goes by so quickly, because it does. I'm about ready to have a high school student, which is crazy. It feels like it was only yesterday when she was entering kindergarten. So I do understand where they were coming from, but in the moment, it really just wasn't very helpful. It just made it seem much worse. And honestly, like while I was going through it, it felt like this is never going to end. This is never going to end.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
it's a
obviously
commitment
it does,
you can't get out of. Well,
right.
that's not probably the best way to say it, but yeah, it's like a lifelong thing.
Right.
Can't return
Right.
it, can't exchange it. Like this is, you did
Right.
this.
Right.
So just for the audience, Jessica
Mhm.
was young when she had her first daughter, Skylar. How old were you? And
I
I
was
was wondering if, go ahead.
Yeah, I was 22 when Skylar was born. So that's why none of my friends were having kids. Like I had just
Exactly.
graduated with my bachelor's degree. Dave's 6 years older than me. So we wanted to, you know, we were trying to think about when we would have a child that made sense for him and me so that, you know, he wouldn't be too old. But I wanted to finish my bachelor's degree before we had our first child. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you could just kind of take me back, like take us back, and when you had Skylar, like what did that feel like back in that moment? You've kind of talked about it in general terms, but I'm wondering if you could go a little deeper.
Sure. Well, I think a little bit of context. Dave and I had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage the first time we got pregnant. So when I got pregnant with Skylar, we were both so excited, but super nervous because we knew it could end, you know, in another miscarriage. And we just weren't sure, like, is there going to be some issue? You know, there's a lot of nerves that go with that. I mean, you know, on top of the typical nerves, like, is the baby going to be healthy? As the pregnancy progressed and we got kind of out of the danger phase for miscarriage, you know, this is probably when my own feelings of, I don't know, lack of joy around motherhood probably started. I was a miserable pregnant person. Like I was in a lot of pain, in my, back and hips. And the doctor was pretty much like, yeah, this happens sometimes. And, you know, so that was something like, you know, as a woman, you want to feel like, I don't know, confident in your abilities to carry a child, right? It's like part of the essence of being a woman. So that's probably where it started. But all of it was surrounding with excitement. Dave's parents were super excited. They, you know, bought us all kinds of stuff for Skylar being born. She had like probably more clothes than she ever could have possibly worn her first year because his mom kept buying outfits and bringing them to us. You know, she's the first grandchild on my side of the family too. So my mom and sisters were so excited about her being born. So there's a lot of excitement about it. And I had a sister that was 14 years younger than me, so I knew about taking care of babies. So I wasn't feeling like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Like I felt pretty confident that I knew how to do it. It's a lot different than when you're babysitting your sister than when you're taking care of your own baby. That's like, you know, waking up all night and you have to make all the decisions. But I'd say probably for the first few months, you know, things were good. It's I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. Like you get used to having to prepare the baby to go do things, and that, you know, you don't have the freedom you used to just go. I think it helped for me that we lived in an apartment attached to Dave's parents' house. So they were able to help me, if I needed to take a shower or something like that. His mom was always happy to take Skylar for a little while to snuggle up with her while I was cleaning the house or whatever. I was also, I had gotten into graduate school, and I was doing graduate school to get my master's degree at the same time that, I was caring for Skylar, and it was working all right. It was also one of the first times that I had not been, though, working, or I was doing this program, but it was just a Friday evening, all day Saturday program for a couple weekends of the month. And then that was it until the next class started. So it's not like I was in school a lot. I think that was difficult too, because I didn't really have this maybe sounds bad. I didn't really have a life outside of being a mom and, doing these couple classes. So it was hard to, it was hard for me to maintain my identity at that time. And I mean, I was only 22, so it's not like I had a firmly established identity anyways, I would say, looking back now. Like it was a time of flux anyways, because I was just graduating from college and starting my master's program. I hadn't had like any type of career type jobs or anything yet, just like, the kind of jobs you get when you're going through college, like at the mall or Myers or whatever. And it was a lot of responsibility. Like I think we were so excited, and we had both thought about like what having a kid would mean globally, not really so much what having a kid would mean day to day and what that would look like. So that was a big realization to come to. We got lucky though that, like I had said, Sky was such an easy baby. Like she barely ever cried. She went to bed easy most of the time. Like she was super easy. We had moved away from his parents' house because we were buying our own place, and we got pregnant with Scarlett. We were excited about it. Like I said, we planned to have 2 kids closer in age. I think probably a couple weeks after Scarlett came home and we moved into this house we had bought, I felt guilty because I kept having the thought, like, what did I do to myself? Like, how did I get into this situation? Like, just kind of feeling, for lack of a better word, and this sounds terrible, trapped. Like, I felt like I've trapped myself in this life. Like, did I ever really stop to think, was this for sure the path I wanted to go on? And I say all that now. I mean, I'm so happy that we did have the girls close together. And I mean, obviously, I think the world of them. They're wonderful kids, but it was a lot of work. And the other thing that I think was really overwhelming for me was I knew that I wanted to. Dave and I had talked about this and discussed how we wanted to parent the girls, and we knew we both wanted to parent based on what we had learned going through school, not so much what we had experienced growing up. So that really put an added pressure.
Can we give a little background on your schooling so everybody knows what that context is?
Sure. So Dave and I both got our undergraduate degrees in psychology. So a lot of learning about child development and parenting strategies that, were most psychologically healthy for children. He got his master's degree in social work. He works as a counselor now, and I got my master's degree in counseling, and I am not a counselor, but I work in child welfare now. So throughout our education, we were kind of forced to learn a lot about human development and psychology and mental health issues. And I think we both came to a lot of realizations about the way we grew up probably wasn't very healthy. And we just, I think every generation wants to do better than the generation before them. I think it's difficult though when you're parenting to parent based on things you've learned as opposed to things you've actually seen occur, because like a lot of things, it sounds great in the book when you're reading about it, right? But what does it actually look like in real life? Like trying to put some of these practices into place. I'm sure we made some mistakes. I think overall we did all right, trying to stick with our principles. But I do think that added an extra pressure that I just put on myself, wanting to make sure that I didn't cause my children some kind of psychological harm that I'm sure all parents cause their kids some kind of psychological harm at some point in time, but really putting that, like, I want my kids to have as normal a childhood as possible, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so wanting to use what you knew versus what was kind of ingrained in you, so what you knew on a different level, right? Like what you knew in context or in, I don't know how to say this in the right way, what you had read in a book versus what you knew and saw growing up. I can imagine that would be really challenging just in life in general, right? Because you have these patterns that were developed that you saw. It was the only way that you knew how things operated for a very long time. Then you're, 18, 19, 20, 25, learning about, oh my gosh, there's a whole other way. And maybe meeting some people along the way that have helped to shape that as well. How did you navigate that? How were you guys able to, like, did you and Dave have a really open dialogue about it? Would you see old patterns or ways that your parents parented coming through in you guys? And like, did you have to stop and check yourself on that? How did that all look?
We did have an open dialogue about the ways we wanted to what does behavior management look like in our household? What are our expectations? Like trying to be clear and laying those out so we were on the same page. I mean, I think we both knew no matter what, we have to support the other one in the decisions we make because we can't let them outnumber us and split us apart, right? So we had a lot of conversations about that. However, we were both coming from environments that we were trying to overcome. So there were times that you would kind of fall back in, like I'd hear myself say something and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. Or, I'd hear him say something or, get irritated or whatever and be like, oh no, what are you doing? This isn't what we're trying to do. So, and then there's guilt associated with that. Like, gosh, I'm trying so hard to do this. Am I ruining it because I made this mistake? And I mean, you're not. Parenting is really a series of trial and error. So, each kid totally, like we could have had the best plan ever and then our kids are born and that plan just doesn't work for them. Right. So then you got to try something else. So, I think, I think we've kind of come to a good mix now, but the other thing too is when you're reading and researching about development, everyone's talking about these first 5 years are so important. The first 5 years are so important. Like that sets the stage for the rest of your development. You can't mess up the first 5 years. So I think, at least for me, I had a lot of that in my mind. Like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure my kids attach correctly and they don't, they're learning the stuff they're supposed to, or the brain's not going to develop correctly. Like just a lot of like silly things that are just going to fall into place if you're just, loving your kids and trying to spend time with them, but, I know there are times, both of us, when we would kind of be like, okay, I mean, now you've said she lost her Pokemon cards for the rest of the month. That was probably a bit excessive. We got to follow through on it because, you know, we have to follow through on it now, but maybe let's not do that again. You know? So I think that part is important. Whoever you're parenting with, you know, making sure that you're having that kind of open dialogue, because there have been times that maybe one of us did something and then the other one kind of calls them out in front of the kids. That does not go over well. That just makes it really difficult. You don't want to, you know, you want to make sure you're not undermining your parenting partner, whoever that may be, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you were saying that sometimes, you know, you have this idea and this plan of how you want to raise your kids and the humans you want them to become, but you'll see yourself go outside of that and there's guilt associated with it. Passion for yourself within those moments.
So that's something I really struggle with. It's something often Dave will say to me is that I have to be nicer to myself when I'm talking to myself in my head, which probably also goes back to childhood. But I have a hard time giving myself grace. Like if someone else told me they did something that I'm giving myself a hard time about, I would be able to say like, oh, you know, it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. You should give yourself a little bit of flexibility. It's not that big of a deal. Like you're fine. Give yourself some grace, right? I have a really difficult time giving myself grace. So it has been helpful to me to have, I guess, a husband that's a therapist that practices these things with his clients, telling me to, you know, think about things in a different way, or kind of challenging me to be nicer to myself, essentially. Like, gosh, you're so hard on yourself. Like, you're never going to live up to these perfect expectations you're setting for yourself. You have to allow yourself some time to just be human. Like, of course you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And like,
and then
learning.
you have this, you have this other layer where you want to then model that for your kids. It's like you are essentially mirroring to them what you're how do you cope with life? So making sure that you're being a good mirror is, I have found that to be the biggest responsibility. Like, I mean, keeping them alive is one level, right? Like it's what they did, right? They got fed today. They survived the day. This day was successful. Like I've had that conversation with myself before. Like, listen, people didn't get a bath. People are only wearing diapers, whatever. It doesn't matter. Everyone's safe. They've eaten. We're all right.
Mm-hmm,
But as they get older, you realize you have this responsibility for like helping them learn good coping strategies, to not be so, you don't like, I wouldn't want my girls to grow up and be as hard on themselves as I am on myself. So it's like, well, then I probably shouldn't be being so hard on myself. I should be modeling better positive self-talk and, self-care. So, I mean, I guess positively, in a sense, it does, at least for me, it's made me constantly try to make myself someone that they would want to emulate, or would be healthy for them to emulate.
Mm-hmm. And then in the reverse, it's also what you want to see in them. Like you're becoming the person you want to see them be, in a sense.
Which is amazing when you see them, like, so the girls now are 11 and 13. They're getting ready to be 14 and 12. So we're really into that, getting into that teenagerhood. It's amazing though, when I see them do something that, like, that's exactly what I would have hoped that they would do. Like stand up for someone, or stand up for themselves, or just show kindness to somebody else, or, be brave and help a friend that needs help. It's been incredible to see some of these things I hoped that they would learn from us, that they actually did learn them. It's amazing. Like that is actually amazing.
Mama,
I
that's
mean, not to say that
you.
there's not still stuff to learn, but that is an incredible part of parenthood, to see them kind of grow up and become their own people. Like, they're really taking on their own personalities now, and it's incredible to see.
Hmm. They're really sweet. When you were sharing that, a story came to my mind. We met at Metro Park together to
Mhm.
have a picnic, and it was you and me and my mom and my stepsister and her kids, and anyways, there's a bunch of us, and my niece and nephew were there, and they are, well, this was a while ago, so they were young. They were like, I don't know, 3 and 4 or 5 maybe. And I remember Skylar, they were playing on the play set and going down the slide and stuff, and she was just involving them. She made them feel welcome and safe, and she was like setting them on her lap and going down the slide and just made sure everybody felt included. And I remember sitting there watching, and I don't know if I ever even reflected this back to you, but I was like, wow, Jessica and Dave are doing a really good job. Like, that is a good human. She's so aware of her surroundings and grounded in herself, and includes others. So anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing a great
Yeah.
job. You're doing a great job.
Thanks,
I'll be calling you
Nicole.
with all my questions if and when I choose to have children.
I mean, I think I appreciate that. I think Sky is very nurturing. It's a part of her personality. It always has been. So she really enjoys being around younger kids, and kind of taking on that caregiving role. She likes that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun to watch her interact with younger kids. And one crazy, Skylar's had a lot of self-confidence throughout most of her life, which is something that we've really tried also. Like, it's important that, girls have, all kids have self-confidence, but speaking from my own experience as a girl, I definitely struggled with self-confidence growing up. So I wanted to make sure that they had that, and they were getting positive messages from me and Dave about, how smart they were and capable they were and stuff like that. So, Skylar has always had this, we used to joke when she was little that she had this like huge inflated sense of self. Like, did we go too far? I don't know. But, then the middle school years happened, and you could definitely see that kind of fading away. Like this, I think through elementary school, kids are sheltered for the most part, and unless they have things going on at home. And, we definitely kept her somewhat sheltered from like the trials and tribulations of the world, as a little kid. And, you get to middle school, and there's no hiding some of these things anymore. Kids are kind of going off and taking paths that they shouldn't be on, and making much bigger mistakes. And, to see her, I guess, have this recognition and start kind of like going into herself was really difficult for me. Like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But I'm convinced middle school is just a terrible time in everybody's life, and it's just very difficult. It's something we all have to survive, I guess. But, I can see her now coming out on the other side, and, kind of getting her confidence back, and being more like herself again, feeling more comfortable in who she is. So that is nice. But definitely there was a time where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting worried.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that happens a lot as a parent, that there's moments of, did we do something wrong, or how, something's going in a direction like you were saying, and yeah, what's your role in that, and how do you change it? But also, I liked how you were talking about, they're two completely different humans. So the way you parent Sky might be completely different than the way you would handle the same situation with Scarlett. And how do you like kind of navigate that when they are so different and unique humans, as every human is?
I think sometimes it's very difficult because I'm sure just, you know, being in a sibling group yourself, everyone wanted things to be fair, and sometimes they just can't be because that it's just not going to work the same, right? Like, maybe it makes sense to let Scarlett do something before I let Skylar do it because she's a different person and she's, I think she's going to handle it better, or I was unsure because Skylar's my first kid and I made her wait longer, or whatever the situation is. So, I think you just kind of have to do your best and know your kids and know what you think is going to work for them. If you think a certain strategy is going to work better with a different kid, then kind of go with it. Like I know Skylar is very motivated by positive reinforcement. Like she definitely craves that like positive recognition. So, we're very conscious of making sure that we're, propping her up when she's doing good and giving her those not self-affirmations, but like parental affirmations of the things that she's doing good. Scarlett is very driven by right and wrong. Like she's very black and white thinker, but she's also, she's very creative and artistic, and she goes about solving a problem in a totally unique way. Like it doesn't really make sense to my brain, but she always gets to the end. Like she always gets to the end outcome she's supposed to. Like, for example, she wanted to earn money the other day, and she's like, is there something I can do to earn money? Because she wanted to get, I don't know, some game on her computer. And I was like, the bathroom upstairs needs to be cleaned. You can do that and earn some money if you'd like. So she did, but the way she went about like doing the tasks was definitely not in the order I would have done it. And I've definitely come to learn that just let her do it. Because the way I think about it doesn't make sense to her. And the way she thinks about it doesn't make sense to me. So, teaching her things and having her do tasks or do schoolwork, giving her the flexibility to kind of go about it in the way that makes best sense for her has been kind of the way we approach Scarlett a little bit differently than Skylar, who I think has more similar thinking as I do about things. So it's easier for me to teach Sky something.
Yeah, because it's like you're in your own brain almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Scarlett is much more like self-directed. Like I think she's more internally motivated about things. So, which is good in a way, right? Because if she's not, if she's motivated to do something, she'll put in the work and she will spend tons of time doing whatever she needs to get it done. The negative of that is if it's something she's not really motivated about, it's hard to kind of build that motivation within her. Like, this is still important whether you want to do it or not.
Whether you think it's important or not, it's important.
Right.
Might not get
so,
it now.
I think that's right. I think it's a personality trait that will serve her really well, as she becomes an adult, just being like self-satisfied with completing things and doing things. But sometimes it can be a challenge. Like I remember she had an assignment in, probably first grade, where they had to write as many numbers as they could, as high as they could. And we had conferences and the teacher was like, Scarlett only wrote up to 70, and I know she can write higher than that because I've seen her do it before. Like, we're going to do it again next week. If you could just talk to her about, how important this is. We're trying to see, like, if they know how to get past 100 or not. So it's like, okay, we'll talk to her. So we get home, and I'm like, Scarlett, how come you stopped at 70? Like, we know you know how to write your numbers all the way past 100. How come you didn't go as far as you could? And she was just like, I got bored and I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Fair.
Like, okay. But so, and I mean, we were able to explain it to her. Like, the teacher really needs to see how high you can go, so she knows if you've learned enough or not. And she did it reluctantly the next time, but she did it. But that's kind of where she's coming from. Whereas Skylar, the teacher told her she wanted her to go as high as she would, so she would do that because she wants to, please the teacher. So.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely probably the biggest way I would say that they're different as far as parenting challenges go.
It made me think of love languages when you were talking about them. And it is so important to know what does motivate those around you and how you can kind of tap into that. Yeah, you're doing such a good job. Every time I talk to you and you talk about the kids, I'm just like, oh, yeah, just doing it.
Well, we're trying. And I would say for anybody parenting, trying is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Just trying.
I'm curious when you, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm taking it in a different direction. So
I was going to take it in a different direction too. I was going to say, you know, as hard as those first few years were, and I was home with them for the first few years. And then I got a job working in child welfare, and Dave started staying home with them. Once I started working in child welfare and seeing some of the struggles that some parents were going through to try to raise their children, and at times not being able to be successful or being in situations that were dangerous, or, you know, having other struggles like drug addiction or, you know, poverty, domestic violence, like there's all kinds of struggles that people are going through. Ultimately, being able to have a sense of gratitude for, you know, things might have been difficult when I was growing up, but they definitely could have been worse. I think my mom did as good of a job as she could have, you know, based on her own history. And that I was doing as good of a job as I could. Like trying to have some gratitude for the benefits that I do have. Like, fortunately, I was able to go to college and I was able to learn about these other techniques and how important child development is. A lot of people don't have the information when they have kids. So, you know, trying to just cultivate gratitude in my life. And I think really being faced with how much suffering some people are going through, made me realize that I should try to have a little bit more gratitude for what I did have. And that, you know, I was trying. And that's why I say I think the most important thing is trying, because some things you can't change. And there are some situations that, you know, you're working to maybe get out of, but you haven't quite gotten out of yet. As long as you're trying to do the best you can for your kids, I mean, they know that, that caring about them and trying to do a good job is definitely the most important thing.
Yeah. And trusting your intuition and having forgiveness for yourself along the way. What's the one thing that you wish somebody had told you before you had kids? Or that you could have, like, if you just could have known something now with, you know, almost teenagers?
It's a really hard question. I think it probably would have been reach out and find other moms that you can trust and talk to, so you're not so isolated in those beginning stages. You know, having somebody you can talk to about what's going on helps make the situation seem not quite as bad as it does when you're only talking to yourself in your head about it. So, or out loud, like I do sometimes. Like to talk to myself. I really do thinking having other adults that you could talk to, one would have helped me maybe feel like I had some other thing going on besides parenting and, you know, these couple classes. It would again given me a different aspect to my life. And then, you know, having other people confirm, like, you're not crazy. This is very difficult, even though nobody says that.
Yeah, to know that you're not alone and that somebody else has been there. And yeah, like you said, you had kids so young. I mean, I was in college. I was drinking and going to the bar and like flying to Mexico the next week because I could. And you're like, I have a child.
Right.
Vastly different life. So I can imagine it would be extra challenging. I remember when I lived in Colorado, I had a friend and she had a baby and she was like, it's the best thing ever. She's like my own form of crack. I just can't get enough of her. And I can't wait to go back to work because I need adult time. Like I need to be around adults. Yeah.
Yeah. That time for yourself is very important.
How did you like rediscover your identity when
I mean, I think going back to work was a really big thing for me. Like by the time I went back to work, I had been a stay-at-home mom for 3 years. And I always, I always say now, like being a stay-at-home mom is very, very difficult. It's super challenging. I was fortunate enough that Dave, when I got my job working in child welfare, that he was willing to take a pause from his career to stay at home with the girls. Because, ultimately we were both working as social workers at the time, 2 entry-level social workers. It doesn't make sense for both of you to go to work because childcare is so freaking expensive that, one of us needed to stay home with the girls. I mean, we might as well not have all of one of our salaries going to childcare. Somebody might as well just take care of them at that point, right? So I was fortunate to have a spouse that was willing to do that. He is really grateful for the time that he got to spend with the girls because he had felt like working full time. He didn't really get to connect with them in the way he wanted to those first few years. I was so grateful to get out of the house and have some other aspect of my life. So it was good timing for both of us. Even though, I mean, working in child welfare is incredibly difficult and draining, and made me have to find strength in myself that I didn't even realize I had. But I really enjoy the challenge of working, and it fills me up to be doing something to serve others. So, working in that field has been something that's given me a lot of. It's helped me kind of feel like I'm myself again. I can do something and show that I'm capable and use my intelligence and, make friends with other adults.
You still have social skills.
Right. So even, that it's not all just work. I mean, I've made friends now through work that we can go do stuff together. And, I can kind of have these other people that I'm hanging out with besides my husband and the girls and, my family. And I couldn't hang out with Nicole because she was in a whole nother state at that time.
I was in Colorado, I know.
Yes.
And not good at keeping in touch via phone. Yes,
sometimes.
I know.
We would talk on the phone sometimes.
And I'd always see you when I came back to Michigan, which was only like
That's
once
true.
a year. Yeah, it's not the
That was
same.
true.
It's definitely not the same.
No. So, yes, I mean, I think for me, going back to work was a huge thing. But there's judgment associated with that too. Like, and I know I've talked to Dave, he felt this like, I don't know, societal judgment, whether it was there or not, that he was a man and wasn't working and providing for his family and was letting his wife do that versus, me staying at home while he was working. So, I think it kind of goes both ways. There's these pressures that sometimes I think too, we internalize that don't even exist, right? Like nobody probably really cares, but we just feel this like judgment from whoever that's probably not even really there. So
society, the media. Well, and then if we
right.
want to dive deeper into that, it's okay, maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't, but if it does exist, does it really matter?
Right.
As long as you're happy with what you're doing and you and Dave were, then that's in the end what's truly important.
Right. And it was absolutely best for us. The girls are super close to Dave, which is wonderful. I have a good relationship with the girls too. Like, I feel like we have a good, family connection. I mean, they're getting older, so they want to hang out with us less now. But when it matters, they do tell us what's going on, and they do come to us for help with things still. So, I mean, I think, I think that's what connection looks like when your kids are preteens and they're trying to assert their independence a little bit. But I think too, I've talked to enough people now and have grown up a little bit. And I've really realized a lot of that stuff is just stuff I put on myself. Like, you see all these other people's situations and you can easily identify, like, gosh, you're being way too hard on yourself. Or, this seems like a huge deal, but that once they get through this next year or two, things will be much easier. But you're in the situation, it's difficult to kind of come to terms with that. When you start realizing this about these people around you, it's like, well, obviously that's probably true in my life as well. I'm making a much bigger deal about this thing that probably isn't that big of a deal. Like, it will all work itself out. I just have to keep moving forward one step at a time. I do sometimes get lost in the bigger picture instead of just like, what's the next step?
Girl, me too. In life in general. Oh man. And then it's like hard to move forward when you're almost overwhelmed by the big picture.
Yes, right. That thinking has helped me. I in my job, because I do programming and policy for recruiting and retaining foster parents. So I've been to a lot of trainings too about parenting, and I think that probably has helped quite a bit. So the big picture thinking really serves me well, because I have to think about like the system as a bigger thing when I'm thinking about what services or what programs do we need to put in place. But sometimes when I'm thinking about my own life, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this task, and it just seems overwhelming because there's like 25 different steps that I'm going to have to take to get there. How do I even know which one to start with? And it's fortunate, I guess, that Dave doesn't really think about things, I don't think, in the bigger picture as much as I do. He's more like, what is the next step? Let's just start with that. What do you think we should do next?
You're like, oh, that's so simple.
Like,
I like it.
It's like, you're like 10 years down the road. I'm like, what's happening tomorrow? So,
it sounds like it's a good balance between you two.
I think so. That helps. It also helps. I think, at least for myself, the older I've gotten, the more I've realized some of my own, strengths and weaknesses. So sometimes you can kind of catch yourself spiraling or getting into these mindsets, and it's like, okay, I've been here before, and I know that I need to take it one step at a time and not get overwhelmed by the situation. So, I mean, life, it's a great teacher. So, as you grow and learn and mature, I think you get a little bit better understanding about, well, one, the importance of things. Like, there are things I used to be stressed out about that I probably would not care about at all anymore. Like, if I could go back and you think about if you could go back and redo, let's say, high school again. Like, there were things that you were probably so worried and stressed out about. And now you look back and it's like, that didn't even matter at all. Like, it wasn't a big deal. And I made such a big deal about this in my mind. And I wasted so much time worrying about it and stressing out about it when it really wasn't even that big of a deal. It's like, there are things going on right now in whatever stage of life you're in that are not that big of a deal. And you will look back on and realize it's not a big deal, but it's hard to pull yourself out of that. So I think the older I've gotten, the more I've tried to realize, like, okay, this is just what's going on in this stage. How do I just make it through to the other side in a way that's not quite as detrimental to me personally by having all this anxiety and fear and stress about it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to approach life. Man, if you could go back with the knowledge you have now, the years would be added to my life and with removing all that
Probably.
stress
Right.
that
Probably.
I caused
Yeah.
myself.
Right. And I see the girls now going through some of that, and you want to just be like, it's not that big of a deal. But if you say it's not that big of a deal, they're like, oh, you don't understand how hard it is.
It's life and death, mom.
Right.
And then you have to
Right.
think back to like you at that age. And yes,
Right.
how do you like is that something you can kind of help them work through, or is it something you think that you just need time to and experience to get to the other side of?
I mean, I think there are some situations in life that you just kind of have to live to figure out yourself.
Like
And I mean,
heartbreak,
the
you
way
can't really
yes, right.
can't
Like
tell
you
them
can't,
what that's like.
no, and you can't prepare them for it, or I mean, you could tell them it's there, and I mean, I think they know that that's a possibility, but you can't really explain to somebody how intense that can feel when you first fall in love with someone, and then eventually get your heart broken until you experience that. When you're going through it, right? It just seems like I don't know if anyone else has ever felt this intensely about this situation, right? So I mean, there are some things I think you can try to prepare your kids for, but I think they have to go through themselves. But there are other things that I've tried to start remembering a lot of the like stories or things that I went through when I was in school and use them as examples for the girls. So it's not just like me saying like, it's not that big of a, it'll be like, when I was in 8th grade, I had this situation happen to me, and this is kind of how I reacted. And looking back, I wish I wouldn't have reacted that way, or I wish I would have let it go, or I wish I would have stood up for myself, depending on the situation, right? And I think that's helped a little bit not seem quite so out of touch, and which I mean is inevitable when you have teenagers, anyways, right? They feel like you're like a million years old, but on another hand, I will say I think being a teenager now is much harder than it was when I was a teenager. Like there are things that girls are dealing with in school that I did not, well, I mean, if they were going on when I was in middle school, I had no awareness of them. Like teen suicide and drug use and overdoses, and I mean,
social media even.
Right. Social media is a whole other animal. I mean, I got my first cell phone when I got my first car, and it was only to be used if I got in an accident or my car broke down. Like it wasn't a thing I like actually used and had. It was just in case of emergency thing. Right?
Was it one of those like prepaid ones? My mom gave me a prepaid one. Like only use this if there's an emergency, because there's only like 20 minutes.
You only have like 20 minutes, and if you use them, right? Exactly. So, it's totally different. Like they are, texting with their friends, or, they're
always connected.
Social media is difficult. They're always connected. And I mean, we've tried to, like follow their social media accounts and stuff like that, so I can see what they're doing. And they have to, one of the rules in our house is they have to keep all their stuff private, because I don't want random creepers contacting them on the internet. But, like they can only be friends with people they actually know in real life. That's our rule. But it's still hard. Kids are mean sometimes. So it's, that part can be, that can be rough. And I do think it's a lot more challenging to be a kid now than it was. And it's funny. Oh, well, it's not really funny. It's kind of, I don't know, however you want to think about it. Dave and I have this running thing, because you'll hear all the time on different shows or in the media or whatever, like, oh, trophy culture, and all the kids get a trophy for everything they do. First of all, I just want to say the girls both play sports. They've never gotten a trophy for anything. So that's totally ridiculous. But also, like, I think like just school in general is much more challenging than it was when we were going through school. Like the pace at which they're learning things and the teaching to the test is, I just think the stress that they're under at such a younger and younger age of having to like know these things and be tested on them and be able to show that they know them is much more intense than when we were in school. So I mean, that's an added stress I feel like I didn't have until high school when we started having like midterms and stuff like that.
Oh gosh.
The kids now, it's like they take these tests that are worth, you know, a huge chunk of their grade, 20% of their grade, 30% of their grade. It's like, oh, in sixth grade. Like
Wow.
That's a lot of pressure to put on an 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
Yeah, and like they still need to be kids at that age. Like they still need to be able to play and be creative and imaginative.
Right. So, yeah, it's hard to be a kid. I would say that.
I'm curious how I liked that you said you share stories from your past with them, which makes it probably more relatable and they're going to trust you a little bit more because you've actually been there. I think that's so great. How do you navigate like being transparent with them and how much is too much and where's the limit?
I mean, there are some stories I probably wouldn't tell them until they were a little bit older. But I feel like a lot of the stories I mean, I guess fortunately for me being able to do this, I didn't get into too much trouble throughout my middle school years, at least. So none of my really crazy stories that I might not want them to know about would have come up yet. You know, I have been pretty open about like whatever. Like I had told Skylar a story recently about being in class with this boy, and I would help him with his math in class, and he was, you know, in a much more popular crowd than I was or whatever. And a few weeks into the class, he had asked me out, and I thought he was I thought he was making fun of me because I was so self-conscious, and he wasn't. I actually was really rude to him because I thought he was making fun of me. And it was something like, looking back, I wish I would have just reacted like a nice person. And even if I was going to turn him down nicely. And he probably doesn't even remember this because it probably wasn't that big of a deal to him, but it was a story that it was a situation that really stuck with me because I let my own lack of self-confidence get in the way of who I am as a nice person. Like I wouldn't normally be like, you know, whatever I said I don't even remember what I said, but I remember feeling bad about it later because somebody had told me like, gosh, that was really harsh. He has this big crush on you, really was asking you out. And I was like, oh, I thought it was like something in a movie where he was making fun of me, right?
She's all that.
So, yeah, exactly. So, I had told Skylar that story as a kind of an example of like, you know, not letting your self-confidence or your own self-esteem issues kind of get in the way of, you know, who you want to be and the type of person you want to be. So, I mean, I felt like that was a pretty open story. And I try to just tell her as openly as I can. She has really enjoyed hearing stories. Sometimes she'll be like, you have another story from when you were my age? So then I have to try to think, because, you know, the stories don't really come up in my head unless it's related to a situation. Like, it's not like I'm thinking about my 8th grade year in middle school very often.
You're not reliving that over and over and over.
No. So, I mean, I haven't thought about it too much, but I do think I'll be pretty honest with her. Like when she gets older and she's in her first relationship, you know, I think I'll be honest about, you know, what I felt like when I was in my first relationship and decisions I maybe made too soon. And I look back and wish maybe I wouldn't have been so eager to please this guy that I was with and thought more about what do I really want, you know, those kind of situations you find yourself in as a, you know, adolescent that, you know, I mean, I feel like our parents were not from a generation where they would talk about those kind of things.
No, not at all. Mm-mm.
So,
No, but I think it's so beautiful that you do, and helpful to be able to hear from somebody else's experience, and not just somebody else, but somebody that you really, really trust and know has been there. It's kind of like almost bringing it full circle back to the beginning of how alone you felt when you first had a child and isolated. And that's probably what your kid's feeling like in this situation. But then when you
mhm,
share your story, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Somebody else has been there.
mhm,
And they even, are on the other side of it. So they can kind of share the whole process and the reflection.
mhm. It's really why I love the idea of your podcast, Nicole, because that's what it's all about, right?
It's
Trying to
totally what
learn
it's
from
all
each
about.
other.
Yes.
Yeah, sharing our stories to learn from each other. I think that's wonderful, and it's a great long tradition of human experience to try to use our own stories as a way to inform the next generation, other people in your community, just other humans. So it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
It's so true. Is there anything else you would like to share on the subject of parenting or anything else, really? Whatever, if there's anything on your heart to share.
Well, I feel like I would be it would be totally unacceptable for me to not say, since we're talking about parenting, that there is an entire group of parents, foster and adoptive parents, who are like extreme of parenting because they are not only doing all of the same jobs, right, that you're normally having to do and having to figure out a way to get through all of these challenges that you have just being a parent, but they're doing it with children who have trauma histories, who are separated from their biological parents, who, are transitioning sometimes into their home, out of their home, and they are totally amazing. I happened into working in child welfare, and I definitely found, I feel like, a passion of mine in supporting these folks that are just taking on this like amazing extra level of parenting and being foster and adoptive parents. So I am super grateful to them all of the time. I have learned so many amazing lessons from different foster and adoptive parents that I've talked to about definitely giving yourself some flexibility and grace. And being grateful for the little moments, because those really do help propel you forward in the difficult moments, remembering those good times. So I felt like that's always on my heart. So I had to say that. And I am constantly amazed at the expert parenting some of these folks are out there doing, and the just the sacrifice and the their ability to do such stellar jobs with kids that weren't born to them, but right now are their responsibility or are forever their responsibility if they're adoptive parents, and just taking that job so seriously and doing this amazing work. It's just incredible, and it is inspiring all the time in my own parenting journey. I like I said, I'm just constantly in awe and amazed, and I know that personally I don't have enough patience to be a foster and adoptive parent, but I am amazed by their ability to do it. So
I'm curious, what would you say are kind of some of the top identifiers of what makes a good foster parent? Like what draws somebody into being a foster parent and allows them to succeed?
I think a lot of people have for lack of a better word, a calling to do the work. It's something that's just really in their hearts that they want to do. They, have a passion for children and their community. The folks that are the best at foster parenting that I've seen are people who have some of their own challenges that they've overcome in their life. So they have some ability to empathize with the parents who have had their kids removed, and are able to not only care for the child, but be a good mentor to the child's parents, and understand where they're coming from and the challenges they're going through. But they're also very patient people, like expert level patient, very patient and just very kind and loving personalities. Like they're the kind of people that when you walk into their home, you instantly feel welcome. Like they just have some of these things are hard to like say into words. Like they just have like a light about them that kind of draws people in.
Yes, more
I mean,
of
not
those
that I'm going to get into auras or anything, but
no, there's energy is real. Energy doesn't lie.
yeah. So I probably one of the things I loved most about when I used to work more closely with foster parents directly before I was doing more of the like policy and stuff. I loved visiting with them because they were always the kind of people that you would leave and you'd feel more filled up, as opposed to, you know, some people you can talk to and they kind of suck all your energy. They definitely were cup fillers. So I you know, always really liked working with foster families because they just did have that light and positive energy. Most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them.
That's amazing. I want to meet them.
And it helped me find my you know, professional passion. I love the work that I'm doing, which is huge, right? It's huge. And it's not ever what I imagined myself doing. Like when I went to college, I imagined myself, you know, being a therapist like you see on TV, like, you know, Tony Soprano's therapist having an office and people just like sit in the waiting room and come in and see you. And now I'm doing this whole other thing, but like I feel like I kind of fell into it and then I kind of found something that I really cared about and was passionate about. So it's given me a lot. So it keeps me motivated to try to give back as much as I can.
It shows. Thank you for doing that work. It's important work.
I love it. And you get to work with really great, compassionate people, which is amazing also.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference, especially when you're working with something that's can be heavy at times.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so honored that you took the time to share.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on the show.
I have a couple of questions that I like to ask everybody at the very end. So, first one is, what is your current life motto or mantra?
Man, that's a tough one. Well, probably after everything that we've talked about tonight, it's probably just things will all work out the way they're supposed to. Just trust the process and let it happen.
Yes. If you could tell every human on the planet one thing, what would it be?
To be kind to each other. I think that's the most important thing. Above all else, be kind.
Yes. Yes, I will second that. And last but not least, if people want to get in touch with you, if they have questions, if they, you know, just want to continue the conversation, is there a way that they can get in touch with you?
Sure. They can reach out to me by email. Do you want me to say my email address, or?
If you could say it, and then it will also be posted in the comments.
Perfect. So I have an old school Yahoo email address, but it is the one I actually use all the time. My email address is Jessica331 Sweet SWEET at yahoo.com.
Excellent. And that will also be in the description. Thank you, everybody who tuned in to listen. It's been great, and we'll see you next time.